Hello, my name is Matt. I'm a manga artist. These are my books. I made them all myself. So I'm here on YouTube to kind of try and bring you like really fast, focused like drawing tutorials. Mainly focused around like manga. So yeah, that is the goal. Today we are talking about the G Pen. If you didn't know already, this is the G Pen. So I'll first off talk about what supplies I use. So this is kind of like the most common question that people get asked. So yeah, we'll start off here. So for the actual nibs themselves, you get them in these little boxes. These are zebra nibs. You can buy them in these boxes of 10 and they're not too bad, or if you're really feeling like it, you can order a pack of 100 from Japan if you're drawing a lot. Yeah, so those are the nibs. For the actual pen itself, I tend to wrap my pens in masking tape, only because I've got quite like chunky hands, and I find like if it's a bit thinner, I kind of get a bit like carpal tunnel going. So yeah, I wrap it in masking tape, makes it a bit more comfortable, and it kind of like you have to cater it to your own sort of hand really. For the ink, today I'm using Sumi Ink 60. This is like my go-to ink in general, mainly because it has a slow drying time. What that means is that when you're working with it, you get a lot more time with it on the nib before it like starts drying on the actual like the nib itself. So it makes it yeah, a lot easier to clean. So this is like my go-to recommendation. You'll also need an old rag. This is from a t-shirt. It was my favorite t-shirt ever, but it broke and fell into tatters, so now I'm using it as a rag. For whiteout, I'm using the Lion Meeson W20. I really wouldn't recommend any other whiteouts apart from this one. This one is just the best. Like, I've used a few now, and this one is just, it's the nuts. One of the other things you'll need is isopropyl alcohol. This is not in fact strawberry jam. This is isopropyl alcohol. This is basically just for like cleaning off your nibs. It's really important. Like, I'd recommend this above kind of anything else really. And optionally a lighter. Yeah, that's going to help you, and we'll talk about that a bit later. So the first thing I kind of want to talk about, and I feel like a lot of people don't really understand it, is like cleaning and care for nibs. This is like the thing that I struggled with the most. I didn't really understand like how to like clean and care for them. So first of all, you want to get yourself all set up. So we've got our ink, our Sumi 60, we've got our G Pen, we're going to need some of our isopropyl alcohol, and our rag as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up our ink like so, and then we're going to dip it in there, but we're not going to dip it in all the way. And you can see there, I've just covered just the end of the nib, but we can also see is that it hasn't quite covered all the metal. There's a little bit right at the end here which isn't quite covered, and that's because you get like oil residue like build up. So the first thing we're going to do before we do any drawing is we're actually going to wipe the ink into the metal. So we're just going to wipe it quite nicely, be very gentle with it. You can already see I've got loads of ink all over my hands, which is going to be very nice later. So let's try and get that in focus. So now you can see the actual ink has kind of like rubbed into the metal of the nib. And this is really important that you get nice coverage, because it's just going to work like a whole lot better. So then when we want to draw, we're going to dip again, and you'll notice as well that I'm not dipping past this little circle bit here. I'm only going to the tip. There's loads of ink on here. Like, you'll get absolutely loads of drawing out of this. So what I'll do then is I'll go ahead and I'll draw like for a little while, and then I might find that I start getting problems. So the first thing I go to is that all I'll do is pick up the rag and I'll just wipe the ink mostly off the nib. I'll get it to that point again where there's like a little layer on there. It's kind of just like a sheen on there. And then I'll dip again and I'll start drawing. Now, one of the things that I highly recommend is that when you finish drawing with the pen, you take your isopropyl alcohol and you dip just the tip of it like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to try and completely like clean off everything on the nib, and we're going to get it right back looking all nice and shiny and chrome. And this is really important. So the isopropyl alcohol, what it does is it will stop like any moisture being on the tip when you leave it. So when you come out the next day, like even if it's got like a tiny bit of moisture on it, it's going to try and rust and it's going to try and corrode this. So yeah, it's really it's a really good step to take, like putting isopropyl alcohol on it, really cleaning it off like once you're finished. Yeah, so let's talk about how we actually draw with the G pen. How do we actually do it? I don't know. So today I'm going to be using this deleter paper. This is like my go-to. This is deleter 135. Let's grab some paper as well. So got my ink, got my pen, got my rags and stuff. So what I want to talk to you about first is imagine two chopsticks. Here we have a nice two chopsticks. I can't get them quite in frame. Imagine this as like the nibs, the little forks on the end of the pen. So there's two little forks on here, and you want to imagine those as chopsticks. So when we're going along the paper like this, what we're doing is we're applying pressure, and as the pressure applies, it's like slowly increasing that size. So ink is flowing down here and it's going onto the paper, and it's like slowly increasing in size. Now if we go from like left to right or right to left like this is fine, because like both the forks are hitting the paper, and we can apply a little bit of pressure as well, so we can get slightly thinner or thicker lines, like if we're doing side to side strokes. But I think what a lot of people struggle with, so if I put that next to it, so if we're doing strokes like this, you can see that like that's how it like works on the paper. So what people struggle with is that when they twist this and they turn it on its side, what they have to remember is that they're actually twisting the forks as well. So now, unfortunately, we're only on like one fork. So what it tends to do is it tends to like bend over like one way or the other, and that's where you start getting problems. So you've got to remember that we can only drag it certain ways, otherwise these two forks are going to like start twisting over each other. And then you're going to start getting like really weird lines pop up. So let's actually make some lines here. So there's two types of lines you can make. The first is like thick to thin, and you can see that I didn't actually clean it off there, even though I told you to do it. So the first is like thick to thin, and the other is like strokes. So you can see one way it works quite nicely, so it goes this way rather nicely, but the other way, if I try and go this way, I kind of get like a weird sound. It doesn't really feel right, and it's understanding that thing with the chopsticks, that you've got two forks, and that when you're like turning the pen, you're like turning those forks on its side. So you've got to remember that. Utilize the pen's versatility as well. This is like the main thing it's really good for, is that you can do like very thin lines and then like nice thick lines next to it. so we can do like a nice thick like nose, and then under the ear. And this is what's really good about the G pen, is you can do these kind of lines like very, very quickly. One other little tip that I have, and there's not a whole lot I can really teach you about actually doing these lines. It kind of just comes down to practice and like feel of it. And one really useful thing I did find is that you'll do like cross hatching like this with it, and you'll do like strokes like this for maybe like the outside lines of whatever you're drawing. But one other thing you can do is you can flip the pen on its back, and you can actually use the back of the pen to get thinner lines. This is really useful. So I'm going to talk a bit about troubleshooting. So it's kind of maybe why you're here, maybe why you're watching the video, is that you've been using the G pen a while and you've really struggled. You can't figure out like, oh, all my lines are like breaking up, like things just like aren't going particularly well. So I'm going to try and talk about like a few of the issues that you kind of get with using the pens. So the first off is just practice. Like in general, it's just getting really comfortable with like how to use these pens, and like the way that they feel and like what kind of strokes you can do with them. So yeah, practice is kind of king. Unfortunately, I've been using these for a few years, and I still like get days where it just feels like a foreign object in my hand, really. The second main thing is proper care, like really cleaning these off, really like looking after them. And one major thing with care as well, and one thing that I really want to like really iterate with you, is that replace the nibs regularly. Don't just keep using this same nib for like a year just because it's on there. I tend to replace mine every week or so, and I maybe draw, 10 pages of manga a week. Sometimes even sooner than that, and you can kind of hear the difference as well. Like with strokes, your lines start getting a bit rougher, like they start getting a bit thicker as well, and like things don't really feel as good. So some of the fixes that I can try and give you. So one of the quick and easy ones is, if we clean this off, sometimes you'll have like, when you first get these, you'll have like a little bit of oil residue that builds up on the nib. So there's going to be a little bit of oil residue, especially when they're new as well. So literally all we're going to do is like grab the lighter, give it a little flick with the lighter, and all it's going to do is just going to burn off that little bit of residue. So that's the first like tip that I can give you if you're getting like split lines and like trouble with lines. The second is that your actual ink itself, so you've got to imagine that these are like particles suspended in fluid. So sometimes what happens is, if you've been using your ink for a long time, is that basically like the ink starts to like coagulate, and you'll often see manga artists every day, they'll put like a drop or two of water like in their actual ink. So that can be another cause of like split lines. And what I mean with split lines as well is like this. It's like I'm trying to draw with it, and things just aren't really. See, it's working quite nicely now. But if I like, yeah. So yeah, if you're getting like trouble with your lines and the ink's just not coming out and things just aren't working well, that's another thing you can do, is you can put a little bit of water in, not too much, and try and like dilute the ink a bit more so that it like flows off those chopsticks that I talked about a bit better. Another major thing to think about is that when you're drawing, you're doing all these lines, and then sometimes you're going to go back over lines, and what will happen is, where we're going back over this, we're actually picking up ink from this line, like it hasn't quite dried yet, and you'll start getting like a build up of ink like on the very like tip of your nib. So that can be another cause. So you can go ahead and like clean that off again, and just try and avoid going over lines all that too often. And the last is it just builds up on the nib. That's why I recommended that like the slow drying ink, just because you get like slightly more working time with it. So yeah, I can't really think of anything else. I've really like written down loads of stuff to try and condense in all the information I can, like everything I know, like everything I've learned about the G Pen, basically. If I think of anything else, I'll put it in the description. It's kind of like my overall routine. So again, like care, really look after it, really like clean it off, use the little like tips and stuff that I've tried to give you, like if you're getting like split lines and things. So if you fancy supporting me at all, because I'm a poor starving manga boy, I do have a couple of books which I've made. You can buy these on my website, and I'm also going to set up a Patreon, because I kind of need some support out there. Unfortunately, the world isn't really catered to like helping artists, unfortunately, and yeah, I'm really trying to do this full time and like make it a full time gig. So I'm going to be bringing some more tutorials for you soon. Look forward to seeing you then. Yeah, let's draw some manga together.